The first step toward the door of knowledge and cultivation, reading Georg Büchner's Leonce and Lena and Danton's Death. Dear readers, we often feel that the word book somehow seems difficult and distant while living in a busy and complex world. After graduation, it's easy to believe that the opportunities and necessity to read books decrease. However, books are more than just tools for transmitting knowledge. They are the most powerful means for us to understand the world we live in, to look inward, and to empathize with the lives of others. Especially literary works possess magical power to move our hearts, widen our thoughts, and reveal what we cannot see. Today, I would like to explore with you two remarkable plays left by the German genius, Georg Büchner, Leonce and Lena and Danton's Death. Though written in the 19th century, these two works still offer surprising insights and raise profound questions about our lives and society today. You might think that a classic sounds difficult and boring. Absolutely not. The reason is that these works more powerfully and honestly portray the nature of humanity and the contradictions of society than the reality unfolding right before our eyes. Let's explore together why these books are important and what they suggest to us. Part 1: The Short Life of Genius, Georg Büchner. Let's briefly get to know the author first. Georg Büchner was a writer who passed away at the young age of 23 in 1813. He lived a tragically short life. Yet, in his brief career, he left behind deep and powerful works that rival any long-lived writer. He studied medicine and was deeply knowledgeable in anatomy, and he was also an activist with revolutionary ideas. These diverse experiences and sharp insights are fully reflected in his works. Germany in the early 19th century, where Büchner lived, was a society in great turmoil. After the Napoleonic Wars, poverty and inequality worsened in every corner of society, and feudal remnants intertwined with new capitalist contradictions, making people's lives increasingly wretched. Rather than turning away from the suffering of his time, Büchner included the darkest aspects of society and the voices of the marginalized in his works. Instead of painting heroic or romantic characters, as was common in mainstream theater of his time, Büchner unflinchingly depicted deeply realistic and painful human conditions. It is precisely these qualities that make Büchner considered a genius ahead of his time. Part 2: Leonce and Lena, the cry of a human being pushed to the edge of the world. Now, let's discuss the first work, Leonce and Lena. Though this play was left incomplete by Büchner, its unfinished state itself exerts tremendous power. Leonce and Lena is known to be based on a true story, depicting the tragic tale of a soldier who, driven to despair by poverty, ends up killing his beloved wife. Summary of the content. The protagonist, Leonce, is a desperately poor and lowly soldier. He does not hesitate to endure any hardship to support his wife, Marie, and their young child. He tolerates the insulting remarks of a superior officer, who is also a barber, and even suffers as part of a doctor's bizarre experiment, eating only beans. The doctor sees Leonce only as an experimental subject, never as a human being. In this extreme situation, Leonce gradually deteriorates mentally and suffers hallucinations. After discovering that his wife, Marie, has an affair with an attractive bandmaster, he is consumed by intense jealousy and madness, and brutally stabs Marie to death. He then jumps into the river and meets a tragic end. Lessons from the work. 1. How poverty and isolation destroy humans. Leonce suffers alone in a system that does not care for him at all. Because of poverty, he loses his human dignity, becomes a target of inhumane experiments, and is isolated by society. Through Leonce, we see how economic hardship and social marginalization can utterly destroy a person's mind and life. Even today, there are countless Leonces silently suffering in our society. If we ignore their voices, we risk repeating Leonce's tragedy. 2. The nature of power and violence. The superior officer and doctor constantly subject Leonce to emotional and physical violence. They mock and exploit him using their position and knowledge. Notably, these individuals don't even recognize their behavior as violence, because in their eyes, Leonce is just a worthless individual. This work makes us reflect on how people in power can unconsciously, or even intentionally, exercise violence upon the weak. It also makes us examine how easily we may turn a blind eye to the suffering of the vulnerable or, without realizing it, align ourselves with the powerful to suppress the weak. 3. Madness and humanity. Leonce's madness is not a mere mental illness but a natural reaction when human resilience is pushed beyond its limits due to extreme pressure and despair. This play shows how vulnerable humans become when their dignity is damaged and emotional support is absent. Leonce's madness screams from within, expressing his inability to understand or adapt to the world anymore. By examining Leonce, we are reminded of the essence of humanity and the fundamental elements that make us human. 4. Truth within imperfection. Leonce and Lena is an incomplete work. Its scenes are fragmented, and it does not provide a clear conclusion or moral lesson. Yet, this is exactly what gives the play such power. It shows us how life itself is imperfect and chaotic. Many times, we find deeper truths not in neatly arranged stories but in these imperfect, fragmented narratives, just like our own lives. Part 3: Danton's Death, Revolution's Ideals, and the Stench of Blood. The next work we will examine is Danton's Death. This play uses the backdrop of the French Revolution, one of the most significant events in human history, which championed the lofty ideals of freedom, equality, and fraternity. At the same time, it was also a brutal history stained with the blood of many people. Summary of the content. The protagonist, Georg Danton, was one of the early leaders of the French Revolution. Alongside Robespierre, he led the revolution but later faced internal conflict as the direction of the revolution changed. Robespierre emphasized virtue and ruthlessly purged counter-revolutionary forces, strengthening a policy of terror. In contrast, Danton grew weary of the excessive violence, declaring, "Enough blood has been shed," and advocated for a more moderate path. Danton was also a character who pursued pleasure and felt the emptiness of life. Eventually, Robespierre accused him of being a hindrance to the revolution, arrested him, and Danton was tried and executed on the guillotine alongside his comrades. This play captures the tragic process in which the ideals of revolution are stained by blood and revolution itself consumes its children. Lessons from the work. 1. The duality of revolution: conflict between ideal and reality. The French Revolution began with lofty human ideals but ultimately devolved into a brutal reality demanding countless sacrifices. This work shows us that even the most idealistic goals, when realized in reality, can bring conflict and loss. The violence committed in the name of revolution and the futility it brings are timeless issues we must contemplate. Today, we are constantly asked to question what price we must pay for social change and reform and which violence can ever be justified. 2. The nature of power and the dangers of ideology. Robespierre elevates virtue and revolutionary ideals to absolute values, purging all who differ. Anyone stepping away from the revolutionary path is branded a traitor. This demonstrates how ideology can dominate human thought and become a tool to eliminate opposing voices. Danton's Death warns us of the dangerous consequences when certain ideas or ideologies are imposed as absolute truths. It reminds us to reflect upon our own society, where voices opposing dominant values are often suppressed. 3. Disillusionment and despair in human existence. Danton believed in the ideals of revolution but fell into profound despair when those ideals were stained with blood. Though he sought solace in pleasures of life, he ultimately found meaning in death non-existent. This play reminds us that no matter how grand our goals, human existence is inherently finite. Whether as a revolutionary or a common citizen, we are all finite beings searching for meaning in limited time. Danton's despair poses fundamental questions about life, death, and the meaning of existence. 4. The role and limitations of individuals in history. Danton was once a revolutionary hero but ultimately became just another individual sacrificed to the tide of history. He realizes he cannot control the course of history, no matter his will. This work makes us reflect on what role individuals can play in the grand flow of history and where the limits of individual strength lie. While we may remember heroes in history, we must also acknowledge that even heroes can be fragile in the face of overwhelming forces. Part 4. The message of Büchner's two works for us today. Though Leonce and Lena and Danton's death differ in setting and characters, they both share Büchner's core thematic concerns: what is a human being, and what impact does society have on humans. In both works, Büchner exposes oppressive systems surrounding humans. In Leonce and Lena, he portrays a social system that destroys individuals through poverty, class, and inhumane science. Conversely, in Danton's Death, he highlights a political system where bloody revolutionary ideologies suppress the freedom and lives of individuals. Büchner also explores human fragility and dignity. Leonce is a weak human being crumbling under extreme conditions, yet he also fights desperately to preserve his last dignity as a human. Danton, despite falling into nihilism, refuses to compromise his beliefs in the face of violence. Through these characters, Büchner vividly portrays how complex and contradictory human beings truly are. In this way, Büchner's works transcend time and pose numerous questions to us. How does our society treat the marginalized? Is there still a Leonce-like tragedy happening today? How do those in power use their authority? How insensitively have we become to the violence of power? Can the ideals and values we pursue become tools to suppress others or justify violence? Where exactly can we find true freedom and dignity as human beings? These are not easy questions, but they are essential for us to confront if we wish to become better individuals and members of society. Part 5. Why should we read Leonce and Lena and Danton's Death now? Reading difficult classics can feel burdensome. However, these two works by Büchner offer us more than just knowledge. They cultivate empathy and critical thinking. Empathy. By reading Leonce and Lena, we listen to the cries of a human suffering at the very bottom of society. When someone else's pain feels like our own, we develop the ability to more deeply understand and accept others. Through Danton's Death, we examine the complex inner turmoil of a human caught between ideals and reality, sensing the human struggles hidden behind historical events. This helps us better understand the diverse people around us. Critical thinking. Büchner's works raise uncomfortable questions without offering clear answers. They unflinchingly expose the injustices of society, the nature of power, and the dark sides of human nature. While reading such works, we naturally start asking ourselves, why does this happen? And what is the problem? Rather than blindly accepting information or public opinion, we learn to investigate the truths hidden beneath and form our own judgments. This ability is essential for navigating the complex world we live in. Ultimately, reading is not simply decoding words. It is an act of seeing the world through the eyes of an author, understanding humanity through the author's heart, and reflecting on ourselves through the author's questions. Though these works might feel tragic and dark, it is within this darkness that we can discover faint yet important lights, what it means to be human and how we should build a better society. Dear readers, Leonce and Lena and Danton's Death are certainly not easy to read lightly. However, these works will create a powerful impact in your hearts and offer a new perspective on the world. If you find them challenging, try reading them aloud, as one would read a play script. Focus on the characters' dialogues and imagine the situations they are in. Perhaps through these two works, you will come to realize that the world of books is far more interesting and powerful than you might have thought. While one book alone may not completely change our lives, it can certainly be the starting point for us to see the world more broadly and deeply. I sincerely encourage you to face these two works bravely and discover your own meanings within them. The knowledge and cultivation gained from books will surely become your most powerful tool, never betraying you.